Well, I have learnt over the last 10 years to embrace uncertainty instead of being afraid of it, because life is a game and business is a game. And if you think about a board game, you wouldn't even play the game if you were certain what was going to happen next. What would be the point? Like, it'd just be a waste of time. Uncertainty is for us so that something happens left field, you weren't expecting it, and it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn from what you missed before that probably has put you in a situation where this is not working out very well for you right now. Do not beat yourself up about it. I think the purpose of life is joy, freedom, and growth. And we cannot grow if we don't occasionally get things wrong. Things don't go exactly to plan, and there's an opportunity for growth. So I always ask, when it feels like something's going wrong, what is the lesson here for me? Where can I grow from this? What can I do differently? If you can flip it and look at it that way, then you can move forward with enthusiasm.
Welcome to the Profitable Farmer podcast, where we share stories and tips to help you run a better farming business and create your very own freedom farm. If you're looking to work smarter and not harder in your farm business, welcome. You're in the right place. G'day everyone. Welcome to Profitable Farmer. Again, I hope this finds the season playing out for you, and all the best for the next few weeks. I've interviewed some industry experts and analysts over the last few episodes before Christmas: grain marketing, meat, sheep, wool, and other. And there was some really clear directions and theories put forward, which I really appreciated. I think what no one predicted was this battle that is playing out now between the US and Iran. And there's often one-off shocks to a local economy or a global economy, which can have significant impact. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves in a period of uncertainty and volatility. And so I don't think anyone really predicted that we'd be where we are. To speak to that and to just offer some tips on how to navigate the volatility and the uncertainty that is existing around farming and agriculture at the moment, I've asked two of my fellow directors in Johnsson, our CEO, and Tracy Secombe, our head of wellbeing and coaching at FOA, to join me just to reflect on what's happened and to offer some tips from a personal leadership perspective and from a business and analytical perspective on how we can look at what's in front of us, stay calm, remove the noise, find the facts, do the analysis, and make strong and measured and even courageous and opportunistic decisions at this time. So, Sam and Tracy, thank you once again for joining us on Profitable Farmer and for sharing your incredible insights. And to all of you, just reflect on, given what's happening, how are you playing personally, and how proactive are you being as a business to make sure that you're minimizing loss and actually making the most of opportunities that are in front of us right now. I hope you find this helpful. And again, Sam and Tracy, thank you so much for your insights. Sam, Tracy, wonderful to have you with us today. Hope you're both incredibly well. Sam, just to kick us off, what's your broad read on what's happening? I know the three of us don't get too lost in media and following the news all that closely, but what's your assessment on what's happened over the last few weeks?
Hatch, welcome everyone, and thanks for having us on here today. So broadly, I think it's the continuation of what we've been seeing for the last few years is that there's sort of this increasing uncertainty around the world at the moment. There's lots of different things happening. There's more volatility coming into our markets. And so in more recent times, we've had this war emerge in Iran, which has disrupted global supply chains, particularly around fuel and energy and fertiliser through to Australia. Just created general trade disruption and global unrest around the certainty of supply into the future, and also, just really impacted fuel prices in Australia. I think we've seen 40 to 50% jump, and a significant increase in fertiliser prices as well, and also significant delays potentially in the ability for our farm owners and our members to forward contract both fuel and fertiliser for the upcoming season.
Absolutely. And there's no doubt that impacts our farmer listeners, but the whole supply chain, right? Logistics, feedlots, abattoirs, grain companies, right through to shipping. It obviously is having, a tangible and real effect on the whole industry's supply chain.
Absolutely, Hutch. And I think it's affecting some enterprises more than others, and we need to make sure that we keep that in perspective, particularly our cropping members and, some of our more intense dairies and those sorts of things that have higher fertiliser and fuel use.
Thanks, Sam. Tracy, what's your comment on what we're seeing playing out for us right now?
Well, I'm probably having more conversations with our members as a result of what's happening. But overall, I think it really depends on how much personal development and mindset work people have done, how they're actually reacting to this situation, and just being able to, understand that that's really important. And we're having really good conversations about it to be able to turn around that thinking. But mostly because I'm speaking to members, there is a positive response to it, but they're aware that the normal habits come back. You can get really good at feeling good until you get a challenge like this, and then all of a sudden things are a bit tougher, and you need to apply what you've learnt around mindset to be able to navigate something like this.
Thanks, Tracy. I think for some of us, and certainly not all of us, our business models and our realities haven't really been tested significantly for a little while. We've certainly had COVID, and that was no doubt a challenge. But the fundamentals of, for example, being in the cropping game, Sam, we've experienced good prices and low interest rates and favourable conditions largely. Would it be fair to say that perhaps this is the first time in a little while that some people have really been challenged in their leadership and have their business models tested?
Yeah, well, I think particularly for our cropping members, Hutch, so we've obviously the lift in interest rates challenged people who had lower equities in the last few years, and then we've sort of saw that disruption in Ukraine that created similar impacts to fuel and fertilizer, but prices, grain prices at that stage were quite buoyant and quite positive, and so I think people kind of felt the effects less. We're in a decile 2 or 3 environment for grain at the moment, and then we're feeling these higher prices and potentially increasing interest rates, and I think that's creating a real pressure for people and a real uncertainty and real concern.
What's I'm keen for both of you to comment on this. The human condition when we first have a shock to our system, I think the first psychology seems to be that we go into alarm and perhaps overwhelm and that we might overdo our level of concern towards a shock. Tracy, what's your comment to how humans tend to respond first to an adversity?
Yeah, well, it's actually part of our reptilian brain that will do that, because that's the fight or flight response to protect ourselves and keep ourselves alive. So even though usually there's not a threat to our life, that's the reaction that we have. And so I think just understanding that's really important so that you don't stay there. So you notice the initial reaction. It might be that the heart rate goes up, you start to overthink and panic. I would say panic is often what people will feel. And you just have to recognize that when we panic, it's because we have automatically jumped to worst case scenario. So we're actually projecting into the future about what could go wrong rather than staying in the present and really being honest and factual about what is happening right now. Because there's nothing to worry about in the moment that you get the news because it hasn't even impacted you yet, but you straight away worry about how it could negatively impact you. And so that awareness is really important, but it is a normal function of us being human. So you don't want to beat yourself up about it either, but it's the recognition of it and then implementing some tools so that you can calm down about it and make some good decisions.
Sam, what's your comment?
I think Tracy's absolutely right. And I think that fear response kicks in and we, start panicking or wondering and jumping to worst case without probably reacting to possibilities rather than thinking in potential scenarios and probabilities that might play out into the future and thinking through how as leaders should we navigate this with our family and our business.
And then we almost can look for evidence to support our panic in media or in our communities. We tend to collude with people who have similar concerns. So we almost amplify the problem sometimes because we knowingly or unknowingly seek out evidence to support the panic, for want of a better term.
Yeah, and I think that is part of our culture that we stick together. We stick together when things are good, but we also stick together when things aren't so good. And so there's this natural sense for us to belong to a flock. And so when everyone's panicking, like people often not brave enough to be the odd one out and actually stand outside of the panic group. So we just get sucked into the vortex of all these people worrying. And so we ring up the person who we know will be freaking out as well. So we can freak out together, because we feel, I guess, validated for that. But we just have to realize that if you think about how our body reacts to an injury, the blood rushes in so that it can actually heal it. And if we don't put ice on it, that will just keep happening and the injury won't repair. And so we just need to accept the initial reaction, and then we need to step away from the hype about it and then get really clear on the facts about it, which is not the projections of a worst case scenario. It's what is real right now. And then we have a clear mind to think about what we can do about it.
Thanks, Tracy. It's a really compelling metaphor. So if I'm in panic and I'm in fight and flight and I am tapping into the media and listening to perhaps some of the drama that exists around this issue, what can I do to self-regulate and come back from panic to composure or something like it so that I can see this for what it is and lead my family and team through this with strength and resilience?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing I would recommend is that you become still. So remove yourself from stimulation, which might be conversations with other people or listening to the radio or watching social media on your phone, and go to a quiet place and shut down your eyes. Because if we can get rid of some of the stimulus, then we're able to go in and regulate those important things like our heart rate and our breathing. So just slowing down your breathing, just becoming aware of your breathing and focusing on relaxing the muscles in your body. So when we go into panic, we usually get tight around the shoulders and the neck area. We might be clenching our fists and not even realize it, clenching our jaw. All of that takes a lot of effort. So the blood is all rushing to the muscles that are tightening up. It's working on the heart rate going up. People can actually have heart attacks when they really panic because of what happens to our physical system. So it's very important for us to be able to regulate all of that and relax everything. And you might need music to distract you or something that can take your mind away from the thing that's making you feel like that. But one of the easiest things for us to do, and we can do it anywhere, anytime, is to slow the breath down, because the mind racing is connected to how fast you're breathing. So if you slow down the breath, you'll actually slow down the thoughts, and that will give you an opportunity to shift the way that you're thinking.
Thank you, Tracy. How different can my questions and decisions be when in those two different states?
It's a really good question, because it's really important to realize that the state that you're in actually influences the decisions that you make. And so that's why state needs to come first. So feeling better first is really important before you decide who you're going to reach out to. If you want to ask questions from somebody, who is the best person? And if you are thinking that, I would say, who is the calmest person you know? Who is the person that handles these things in a relaxed and calculated, logical manner rather than freaking out? Don't go to the person that freaks out. And be okay with you being the person that potentially reacts that way, but you know somebody else who's calmer. Don't beat yourself up about that, but reach out to that calmer person. But just knowing that your state and being relaxed is the most important thing you can do before you start to take any action. And our decisions are skewed by the state that we're in emotionally. So if we're feeling optimistic, then our decision making will be influenced by optimism. And if we're feeling pessimistic, then that also will influence our decision making. And we make the best decisions if we are optimistic and realistic at the same time. So we don't go off with the fairies with our optimism, but we maintain that balance.
Thank you, Tracy. Just one more question on that. Can I shift my state from pessimistic to optimistic, irrespective of what's going on around me?
Yes, you can. So obviously there are times in our lives that it's easier to be optimistic than others. But what I would recommend that you do is you go to a thought about a place or a circumstance where it's easy for you to be optimistic. So for example, you might feel pessimistic about your business right now, but you might feel optimistic about your football team winning this weekend, for example. We all have areas in our lives where it's easier to be optimistic. And so that's when you want to practice your optimism in a place where it's easy. And then you're going to be able to bring that feeling back into this situation.
That's a great insight. So I can tap into the feeling of being optimistic around my footy team and then bring that back to helping me be composed about how I go about thinking about some of the business problems that I have.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the reason it's easier to do it about the football team, depending how diehard you are, but there might feel like there's less at stake whether your team wins it not or not compared to the business, for example. And so it's just recognizing, oh, I put a lot of weight on this. And so it's just saying, okay, I want those same skills though. I want to be able to be in that relaxed state, even though I've got more stakes around this decision than others. And that is why sometimes we panic, is because the stakes mean that we jump into projecting into the future and worrying about worst case scenario, but that does not help us make good, solid decisions.
Sam, you and I have spoken about, and thank you, Tracy, you and I have spoken about leading your prior team, prior to FOA, through COVID. What's your comment on managing your state and maintaining composure as a leader through adversity?
Yeah, so I was running a consulting team. We had 65 people working under us. We all ended up working from home, and it was very uncertain how the new world would operate. We worked in multidisciplinary teams with different organizations supporting, private and public sector clients, and it was all very, very unclear what was going to play out. And I think in reflection, looking back, Hutch, one of the biggest learnings I had is that I got very tuned into the news, and I was, listening into the daily updates and the podcasts about what was going on with COVID and all those sorts of things. And it was about 6 months into it that I just realized that stuff wasn't serving me. And about 5 years before that, I'd completely shut off social media and news and all of those things because they weren't adding value to me as a leader or in my life. And I'd got sucked back into that vortex, and just the state that I was in, as to Tracy's point, and the constant stuff that I was feeding into my mind wasn't supporting me to be in a optimistic and realistic state about the future. It was very much grounded in the latest headline and how many people were dying and what was getting shut down next. And I just realized that a lot of that wasn't actually serving me to make a better decision for where to next for our team and for our business. And so I think one of the key lessons that I got out of that was to go in and gather as much information as you can at the start. form some hypotheses. What is it that we think potential outcomes might be for the future? What would a really good outcome look like from here? What would a most realistic outcome look like from here? And what would a worst case outcome look like from here? And then think about those different scenarios and how we're going to respond as a business. And then just shut off from the news and those sorts of things and look for evidence from time to time to help you understand which path is it that you're on, and then react and respond accordingly as a leader. And that shift, really changed the way I felt as a leader, and also the way that I was showing up to the problem and the opportunities that we were able to take through the back of that, rather than just continually reacting to the latest challenge.
Thanks, Sam. So I think it's a really important first key point that we've got to, in these moments, just check in on our state and make sure that we're doing what we need to do to self-regulate and find composure in how we lead through uncertainty. Tracy, one more question around this. There is a lot of negativity in the media. There's a lot of hype around this. There is a lot of catastrophizing in my environment. And even when I chat to people up the road or I run into people in my community, it's all that we want to talk about. What would you say about how we stay aware and alert to what's going on, but not let it impact our psychology?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for you to understand the purpose of media. So, when media used to be offline, it was to sell newspapers. Now it's to get clicks and comments. So, it actually feeds on fear. So, if you're going to get your information from that kind of mainstream media, then you can guarantee that you're going to feel fearful, because that is what they're aiming for. So, you need to go to a resource. So if you want to find out the facts, you need to get it from someone who doesn't sell fear and they actually want to give you the facts. That's really important. And you just need to be very clear on what you actually need to know. Don't scroll media for the sake of it and find out all this information that's completely irrelevant to you, and all it's going to do is stimulate your fear. And then you've got your facts, and then you work on those facts. Reach out to people who do well in these situations, and they are currently doing well. I was talking to one of our members during the week, and he has been with us at Farm Owners Academy in our programs for 7 years now. And he has been very proactive with his decision making, and he's actually sitting in a really good position. And he wanted some extra support around mindset, because he said there was still this kind of niggle, even though he knows he's completely on track. He's made some really good proactive decisions and things are going well given everything that's happening. And there was a couple of things that we realized. Was the niggle was he felt a little guilty when he was around other people who were panicking, because there's this innate feeling inside of us where we want to fit in, even when it's better not to fit in because everyone's panicking around us. And then the second part of it was when I asked him about the circumstances that he grew up in, I said, was your dad a farmer? And he said, yes. And I said, did he worry? And he said, absolutely. He worried all the time. And so even though he's learnt these skills, there's still a part of him that has inherited this just conditioned way of thinking, am I missing something? Everyone else is worried. Why aren't I worried? And so I think that if you can tap into people who you can see have got it together and are managing things really well, reach out and get support from those people. Get your advice and your update on the state of play from those calm people, rather than the ones that are purposely trying to make you fearful, like the media, or the ones that are panicking themselves.
Comment. One of my favourite songs, John Williamson, Good News Never Made the Paper Sell. It's so true, Tracy. Sam, once we've self-regulated and we've found a sense of composure and perspective within ourselves about the situation, we get to fall back into logic. What's your comment on what we can do to kind of look at this as it is, collect the data and make some measured assessment of good, bad, great outcomes that might, play out for us from here?
It's a really good point, Hutch. So the businesses we work with that are forecasting their business really well, and we talk about a forecast, it's different to a budget. It's a live document that you're acting in every month, and you've got a 12-month look ahead at a minimum into monthly cash flows in your business. The businesses that are forecasting their businesses really well, the first thing they did when they heard about what was going on is they figured out, well, what is the likely change in fuel and fertilizer prices for our business? They jumped into their forecast, they plugged that information in, and they looked at, well, what does that actually mean? And for a lot of them, it gave them the confidence to act quickly because they knew their situation, they were happy to accept it. And for others, they realized that perhaps they had to think about what they were doing a little bit differently. And so they were able to go and start having those conversations with their agronomist and others in their team to figure out what it is that they could do to mitigate the impact of those changes. And they're also looking at, well, what might worst case scenario be? And what does that do in terms of our forecast? Are we okay? And I think a lot of the time our anxiety around this stuff, Hutch, stems from a fear that we're going to run out of money, or, that we're not going to achieve the outcome that we were wanting to achieve. And, when we talk about business model and those sorts of things, we're looking for a high level of performance over a 10-year period, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have years where you break even, and a break even result is a really good result. And this year might be one of those years for croppers if prices stay low and input prices are high. So managing and minimizing the loss in those years is often just as important as maximizing the profit in those good years. So that's my number one tip for people, is to have a great forecast and to be testing these issues in the forecast. And, the other thing that one of our members came on and to the Q&A, Greg and I ran about 4 weeks ago on this with our members, and he said, look, we've tested it with the forecast, we've locked in our fuel and fert, but also our grain prices have jumped just at that period, had jumped 30 or 40 bucks a tonne on the futures price. And he was able to secure futures that meant that had completely negated the impact of those fuel and fertilizer price increases, and took advantage of that as well. So he's looking for the opportunity and the risk at the same time. And I just think that's a really mature way to kind of be thinking through this, and stops that rumination that happens. You lie in bed at night wondering what the outcome's going to be and will we be okay, and those sorts of things, when you can actually put it into numbers and see what does worst case outcome look like. Can we accept that or not? If we can't, well, then we've got to go to work and as a team get happy about it. But what does most likely case look like? And often what happens is most likely case isn't as bad as what our mind is first telling us it's going to be.
Sam, you and I have spoken about how the media focuses on the uncertainty and amplifies that. But I think you've talked really strongly about the fact there's uncertainty, there's volatility, and there's risk. Would you mind speaking to those three constructs and how they relate back to our decisions in business?
Yeah, absolutely, Hope. So uncertainty is about unknown. It's unknown future events. Like, what I do know is that there will continue to be uncertainty, and the world is becoming more and more connected. And so, we're facing uncertainty from all different angles as business owners, and it seems like those cycles happen quicker. So uncertainty is increasing, and the way that we kind of deal with uncertainty in our business is that as leaders, we need to remain flexible and agile, and we need to be resilient to the things Tracy was talking about in our mindset. But we also need to be thinking about how do we build a resilient business in terms of buffers and those sorts of things, a business that can absorb some of these shocks. It's not running really close to the wind all the time. Volatility is just the degree that to which prices or things fluctuate. So it could be production, it could be prices. But as farmers, part of farming is dealing with volatility. We've got volatility in seasons. We're commodity producers. We've got volatility in prices. And so what happens with uncertainty often is we see the volatility of the prices increase. And so that's what has been happening with inputs at the moment. And it can also happen with commodity prices. And then risk is the exposure to a positive or negative outcome in our business. Okay, so that's the actual thing that impacts the business. And so often we're like reacting to this uncertainty, which we have no control over really, and is external to us. And what we need to do is we need to think about the uncertainty, understand how that might impact the volatility of the things that we're dealing with. And then we need to focus on, well, actually, what is the risk and opportunity for our business in dealing with this uncertainty? And so thinking back to what are the 4 or 5 risks and opportunities that might be created through this, and how do we position the business to either minimize the downside or take advantage of the upside. And it was, really another one of our members the other day was sharing the outcome of a mastermind call that they had in our alumni hutch. And the question they asked was, what are the opportunities for us with what's happening at the moment? They'd thought through the risks really well, but what are the opportunities that we're not thinking about? And they realized that they have quite a large contracting business that carts a lot of fuel, and they had some surplus fuel carting equipment, and they've identified that probably there's an opportunity to sell that at a premium at the moment. And so they're seeking those opportunities.
So, Sam, one of the constructs that we remind our members around a lot is to focus on what you can control. I guess to a large degree, let go of what you can't. What are some of the things that we can control that are slightly outside the obvious here?
So, as one thing that I'd really encourage people to do is test any decisions you're thinking about making in terms of scaling back inputs in your forecast, and look at it compared to what would happen if you just proceeded with higher prices, and what would the grain price need to be, because those things are out of your control. But what is completely in your control is all of the overhead costs that exist in your business, and often scale is the thing that can help you deal with those. So if you're operating a business that's out of scale to its overhead, so that you're not generating enough revenue for the amount of overheads, might feel counterintuitive when things are higher, inputs are higher and those sorts of things at the moment. But if there's a lease opportunity or those sorts of things, that actually might not be the worst opportunity in this year if you can get access to the inputs. So doing the numbers on those things still and staying open is what you can control, Hutch. And we can absolutely control how we line up our suppliers and the relationships that we have with them. So if you're concerned about supply, being in contact with those suppliers and making sure that you're placing orders well in advance, and that you're not, letting yourself get to the point where all of a sudden you need these inputs and you don't have them, that you're lining them up in advance, and that you can control like where you get support from and who is around you in helping you make these decisions. And so I think that's a really, really important decision at the moment as well.
I think that's a key third point, Sam, is when our business models are being tested, it probably gives us a fresh look at the people we have around our business and the degree to which they're contributing positively to the decision process and how we might adapt our business models. So there probably is an opportunity to stop and reflect on, the degree to which our advisors are really turning up for us right now, for example, and the degree to which our suppliers that we choose to play with are really leaning in and turning up for us right now. And maybe from this, one of the learnings can be that there's an opportunity to adapt and adjust who we have around our business to help us get through these times.
Totally. And I think one of the other things I'd like to raise is sometimes there's less that you can do when times are challenging like this. Like, it's like insurance. You can't get insurance when your house is on fire. It's hard to get finance when things are difficult. Often businesses that are really struggling through uncertainty are paying for decisions that they made that were not the right decision when things were good, or they missed taking opportunities when things were good. And so when you've had a good year, making sure that you're optimizing your finance so that you've got free cash rather than just paying cash for things, so that you've got a buffer when you hit uncertainty. When you've got high machinery prices and surplus equipment, you're not just hanging on to it for the sake of it. You're capitalizing on those things and freeing up the cash. It's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow when we're in the middle of it at the moment, but I think it's a lesson that people can learn through this. If they're feeling a little bit tight at the moment, I'd really challenge them to reflect on what were perhaps some decisions we didn't make or some opportunities we missed when things were going better that would have set us up, because that is a learning that you can take into the next event. Because what I do know is that there's going to be more shocks. Don't know exactly what it's going to be, but we're going to have to navigate through these things as business owners in the future.
It's a great comment, Sam. What can we learn from this shock to our system that can set us up to be able to handle the next one, with more agility, with more flexibility, and with more resilience, as you say. It's a great comment. Tracy, what else do you see that we can control and focus in on with positivity and optimism right now?
Well, one of the things that you might feel like you can't control at the moment is the way that you're feeling. And as I've mentioned many times before, our male farmers sometimes don't really know what they're feeling, can't really articulate emotions. But if you're feeling calm and relaxed and optimistic, you're going to have a clearer mind and make better decisions. And I had a beautiful example of this occur just this week, actually. So one of our members was in the Stock Horse Nationals, and she was nervous about it and really looking forward to it and hoped that she might get in the top 10. Anyway, she remembered something that I taught her, which is instead of being really attached to the outcome, and which was making her really nervous, oh God, I really want to get in the top 10, that just made her kind of panic. She decided to just go in and participate for the joy of it and just really enjoy it. And she did that and she came fifth. So she was absolutely over the moon. And then her next question to me was, how do we make a decision about selling cattle? And I said, well, you apply what you applied to when you were in the horse competition. And so what she did is she went out with her family to celebrate the end of school term. And so they were completely distracted about the decision making around selling the cattle. And then they received a phone call from next door wanting to buy the cattle without the freight costs. And then within 24 hours, they had another opportunity for adjustment. So these things fell into place when they shifted, and she shifted how she was feeling, getting into that panic of being attached to a certain outcome and putting pressure on herself to make this decision, and worrying about what would happen if this or that happened. So I think that these opportunities are always there, as Sam was saying, but if we feel better, we're more open to them and we're more likely to be in the right place at the right time.
Tracy, we talk about raising our vibration. So moving from panic to composure and from composure to optimism is within us to be able to achieve. We've sort of explored that. Can you speak a little bit more to how we can go about raising our energy levels and the benefit of that, even perhaps beyond optimism?
Yeah, I think feeling good is something that people just think depends on what's going on around us. So for most of us, our emotions are conditional. So they're based on the conditions. We feel good when it's raining if we want it to rain. We feel bad, if it rains and we don't want it to rain. So it's kind of got it back to front. I can't feel good until things are going my way. But for things to go our way, we need to feel good first, because we're just better when we feel good. And the purpose of emotions is to draw your attention to what you're focused on. So when we're focused on the problem, we're not going to feel good. When we're focused on the solution and we're optimistic about it, then we'll feel better. And in terms of helping yourself to feel better, just start where it's easiest. And a lot of us get addicted to worrying about the problem. And there's a reason for that, because each thought that we have attracts another thought like it. So you kind of end up down the rabbit warren of worrying. And this is why we can feel like we're spiraling. And we can spiral down or we can spiral up. But most of us, if we're left to our own devices and haven't done this sort of work, will spiral down, because that's the reptile brain. So if you can start with genuine gratitude, gratitude is actually one of the highest emotions you can feel, if you really, truly feel grateful for something, and it needs to be genuine. So people who just write, I'm grateful for blah, 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 robotically, it just doesn't do anything. And it can start really small. I remember years ago when I had postnatal depression and I knew that I needed to feel grateful. I just started with my pillow. I was just like grateful for my pillow and grateful for my bed, because that's where I felt most relaxed at that time. So it might be very, very small. You might be grateful that you live out in the open, for example, and that you're close to nature, that your kids are healthy. Your 2-year-old is still giggling regardless of what's going on internationally, and just really tap into whatever it is that can make you feel a bit better. The other important one that we talk about all the time is exercise. These are the sort of things when we go into panic that go straight out the window. Oh my God, I don't have time to go for my run this morning because, I need to worry about what's going on in the world and how it's going to impact my business. I would say, absolutely, you need to go for the run or the walk or the bike ride or whatever it is that you do, because it's actually been proven that it's the equivalent to taking an antidepressant to go for a walk, particularly first thing in the morning. So those sorts of habits are even more important now, and they're the things that'll get kicked to the curb because you're distracted and you think you have to put all your energy into worrying about this problem. So amp up the self-care during these sorts of times.
What a great comment. Thank you. So just to reflect on our conversation, firstly, we've just got to check in on our state and look at how we can move from angst and panic to composure and optimism, perhaps. Then, Sam, to your comment, remove ourselves from the drama and the media and the negativity and look for the facts, collect meaningful data that can help us make logical and informed decisions. Then lean in on our forecast and look at worst case, average case, best case, and understand how we might need to continue or even adapt our system for what's playing out to either continue to pursue a profit or move into that state where we're just trying to minimize losses and get through. From there, gratitude and other constructs like it, like exercise and those things, can help us really lift our energy and have us arrive into a more powerful mindset. How does all of that then help us turn up to our family and our team and lead the people around us more strongly, Sam?
I think the other thing I'd add, Hutch, is focus on the learnings and the lessons that come out of this rather than beating yourself up for the position you're in. So use this as an opportunity to learn what you didn't quite get right in the lead up to it or what you could improve, and then go and take the action to get into that. And so I think if you can help your team and your family get out of the drama and confront the facts, and that you can engage them and enroll them in a plan that will lead the business through the situation that you're navigating, and they're all bought into that, it also helps them remove some of the fear and angst and frustration that might be getting transferred from you. And collectively, as a team and as a business, it's amazing how your team will rally around that and the opportunities and the things that they might see. And I think what's important to notice, I think Greg did some work the other day, 800 odd cropping businesses that we've benchmarked over the last 5 or 6 years. And looking at the data, I think fuel costs, and there's some significant droughts in there, fuel costs were only around 11% of the total revenue. So if they double, then profit will reduce by 11%. And we can do the same analysis for fertilizer. But if you think about what that means, you only need an 11% increase in prices or yield to offset that fuel cost. So if you can enroll and inspire the team around, look, here's the problem, here's what we've got to solve, team. Just being better with your timeliness or making sure that you're really on to what you're doing that year and the team being really engaged into that could be the difference. So I think that's the main impact, Hutch.
Yeah, and to your point before, Sam, if someone leans in and gives that little bit more energy and time to proactively how we market, that price uplift that might then offset the increased input costs that we're facing. Great comments. Tracy, how else can we, once we've done what we've talked about, is there anything else you see that we can do to turn up to our family and our team and lead them with strength?
Leader of a family and a business is the center of the influence. And so confidence is very reassuring. If something scary is happening, your child will look up at you to see how you're reacting, to know whether they need to be scared or not. And it's really the same with a team. Cultivating that confidence in yourself one of the ways self-confidence is very interesting. I work with a lot of people around self-confidence. And what I find is that most people, the human condition is that our self-confidence is conditional, which means when the conditions are good, we feel confident. And when they're not, we don't. Now, that's just not going to work for you, because if you think about, I love Trevor Hendy, and we always use his comment about, the conditions are always perfect. Like, he just wouldn't go out and do that Ironman when the weather was bad if he lost his confidence every time the conditions weren't good. And so we have to cultivate this confidence in ourselves, this resilience in ourselves, and that will radiate to the people around us, and that will influence what we say to them and the direction that we give and the buy-in that we get from them. So, from a practical point of view, exactly what Sam said, but from a self-confidence point of view, and the way to build your self-confidence is to reflect on all of the things that have gone well for you in the past. We tend to focus on our mistakes more than we do on our achievements. That just seems to be this tall poppy syndrome thing that we do, where we're all so humble, in Australia in particular. I think they're the same in the UK. And it's just realizing that you have achieved a lot of great things in your life, and remember that so that you maintain your confidence.
Thanks, Tracy. I think a really nice point to finish on here is the concept, Sam, that you raised, that there's nothing sure that there's going to be more uncertainty that we're going to need to face and lead our people through into the future. And I think your comment was that because we're becoming so much more connected and the world is becoming so much more interconnected, that uncertainty might even come at us more quickly than it has in the past. What's your final comment to you both on how we can take the learnings from this shock to our system and then set up personally and professionally ourselves as leaders and our businesses to be able to better withstand future shocks? Sam, can I throw to you first?
The first thing you've got to do is look for the lessons, Hutch. And I think there's a human tendency to just stick our head in the sand and wipe the tough year off and to get through it and kind of move on. And I think being open to exploring what can we learn from this and just looking for those little lessons and treating those lessons as wins. Like if you learn something new, that's a win. I think that's where it starts for me, Hutch, and really challenging yourself to understand, well, what does it mean to run a resilient and profitable business that can withstand uncertainty into the future, and being clear on what that looks like for you and your family. And to Tracy's point on confidence, I think often what precedes that confidence is competence. So, learning and going and getting yourself educated, if you're not 100% clear on how to do that, can be a great way to really build your confidence in the future for both your business and your family, because you've got the tools and the systems that you can put in place to navigate that uncertainty. So that would be my tips, Hutch.
Great comments, Sam. Thank you. Tracy?
Well, I have learned over the last 10 years to embrace uncertainty instead of being afraid of it, because life is a game and business is a game. And if you think about a board game, you wouldn't even play the game if you were certain what was going to happen next. What would be the point? Like, it'd just be a waste of time. Uncertainty is for us so that something happens left field, you weren't expecting it, and it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity, like Sam said, to learn from what you missed before that probably has put you in a situation where this is not working out very well for you right now. Do not beat yourself up about it. When you recognize that you could have done something better, go, great. Now I know this is an opportunity, because this is what I think. I think the purpose of life is joy, freedom, and growth. And we cannot grow if we don't occasionally get things wrong. Things don't go exactly to plan, and there's an opportunity for growth. So I always ask, when it feels like something's going wrong, in inverted commas, I say to myself, what is the lesson here for me? Where can I grow from this? What can I do differently? And it's a jump point for you. So it's an opportunity to celebrate it. And if you can flip it and look at it that way, then you can move forward with enthusiasm.
Perfect final comment. Sam, Tracy, as always, wonderful to connect. And to our listeners, I hope this has been of value in helping you just self-reflect on how you have navigated this recent shock to our system and how you can adapt in real time for your own benefit, for the benefit of your family, for the benefit of your team, and in preparation perhaps for the next shock to the system, and ensuring that you collectively do that with more strength and resilience. Tracy, thank you for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks, Hutch.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
So, team, some great comments from Tracy and Sam about checking in on our state and our mindset toward this, making sure that we're keeping perspective and not majoring what potentially could be a minor or a medium issue for our businesses right now, collecting the facts, and then on those facts, making some really thoughtful and measured decisions and staying focused on the things that we can control. Some really compelling insights, but we can learn from what's happening now and make sure that our businesses are more resilient for it and that we learn and correct and improve for next time. As Sam says, there's no doubt there's going to be another one-off shock to our system beyond this one. So let's make sure that our businesses are better for what's happening, and let's remain strong in our leadership through this. We have a webinar workshop coming up that Greg and Sam are going to lead on this topic of leading through uncertainty. So we'll share that in the show notes. And I'll also share a link to our cash flow optimizer, which is a really compelling short course that can allow you to analyze and model decisions through a forecast to make sure that you're really looking intently around how you're adapting your business model given what's playing out. So look for those in the show notes. All the best for the start to this season and with the headwinds that are in front of us. As I said at the outset, I hope you found this session with Sam and Tracy useful. Take care, everyone. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Profitable Farmer podcast by Farm Owners Academy. If you're new to this show, be sure to follow us. If you've been a long-time listener, let your friends know about us or come continue the conversation in the Profitable Farmer Facebook group. All the best as you grow your business and create your freedom farm. Until next time, keep being incredible.